In our last segment on footprinting, what we want to talk about now is how to defeat footprinting, how to, as much as you can, minimize the ability of an attacker to footprint your organization. Now, footprinting can be minimized, but you can't necessarily eliminate it. And that's simply because there will always be some information out there on the World Wide Web, on the internet, in social media, and so forth. And really, you wouldn't want to take away every piece of information because you obviously have to have an internet presence for your organization to survive. This will be in the form of advertising, your own websites, connections. So all of that's positive, and some of that information, unfortunately, can be used in the negative for an attacker. Those are the chances you take. But you can minimize the sensitive information out there at least and try to make sure that it's not out there in bulk, that it's been carefully reviewed and looked at before it gets out there. So you should review all the information published on any websites that goes out in email, obviously, and that appears in social media to make sure that it's sanitized and cleaned of potentially sensitive information. You might want to establish a policy where anything that's put out on the internet, even by an employee on their personal social media site, is subject to review by the company. You need to make that policy and enforce it so that things that shouldn't be out there don't get out there. The other thing you need to do is train and educate your users on how footprinting works and how to avoid leaking this sensitive information about your organization and about themselves. You wouldn't want the employee to put out company phone numbers or talk about security issues, for example, on their blog site that the company has. So make sure you take care of this by training and education and reviewing all the information that goes out as much as you can. Now, some of the things you really want to restrict from going out there: any type of personnel names or information, like the name and address of the CEO, for example, or the technical points of contact within the company. Limit the information you put out there. Maybe put out a central 1-800 number and the company's post office address for any technical issues or business issues. Let them call the 1-800 number and then direct them to the right person. Don't put that information out there. You also might not want to put out any information on the architecture of the company, its network, its infrastructure, and so forth. And don't talk about any equipment upgrades. One thing you probably shouldn't do is on websites, particularly job sites, is talk about the operating systems you use and the different systems. Obviously, you can't avoid that completely because when you put a job ad out on a job site, you're going to be asking for people with specific skills. But you could figure out a way to narrow it down, to ask for people with database experience, for example, versus people with MS SQL 2000 experience. So you might want to do that. Any kind of organizational changes like reorgs or anything like that you might not want to put out there, or at least manage the information that goes out about the organizational change. Something like an IPO about to happen or stock prices about to go up or down is sensitive information, so you want to control it until it's time to get out there and control the manner that it's released. Any kind of internal or sensitive information that you don't want out on the internet, that's what you should control. You should create a policy that defines your information, defines the categories for it, the sensitivity of it, and what you're willing to do to protect it, and train your users on how to protect that information. So identifying that information that could be harmful to you during footprinting is important. Now, what are some other things you can do, obviously, to minimize footprinting? Well, try to limit your competitive intelligence, and that basically goes along with everything else we just talked about that you should limit. Any business practices or business partnerships or new product lines, limit what you put out on that. Anyone you deal with, you should require non-disclosure agreements with, so that they do not disclose any competitive information or competition-sensitive proprietary information, that sort of thing. You also might want to do your own periodic searches. Do Google hacking on your own organization, your own company, even yourself, and the people that work there to determine what's out there. Knowing what's out there is half the battle, because once you know what's out there, you can do a couple of things to minimize it or change it if you need to. Be suspicious of overly inquisitive persons. We're going to talk about social engineering later on in the course, but social engineering can be used to footprint an organization as well. So be suspicious of people who are overly inquisitive. Educate your people on this as well. People who call and ask for company information that really the public shouldn't know. Also screen your waste and trash. A lot of information, again, this relates to social engineering. But a lot of information goes into the dumpster that shouldn't go there. Company phone books, product manuals, and so forth. So screen that type of information and make sure it doesn't go out there. The big thing with footprinting is educate people on what information they should not be putting out on the internet or public sites or social media, blogs, and so forth. Educate them on footprinting and how a hacker does it so that they can see why you don't want this information out there. Educate your users, your customers, your executives, your technical people on footprinting and what it can do to the company in terms of giving an attacker information to use during an attack. So education is probably the best thing you can do. It's probably the most effective thing you can do to reduce footprinting. Again, you can't completely eliminate it, but you can minimize it whenever you can.